The Stormlight Archive is an absolutely massive series. If you're watching this, you're most likely up to date by now and you've read almost 5,000 pages worth of epic fantasy. Now, on the first read through, it's pretty easy to follow the main story, but there are so many little side plots, side characters, and conspiracies going on in these books. There is so much to uncover. And that's before you realize the Stormlight Archive is part of an even greater world known as the Cosmere. Well, I'm here to help you uncover all these little secrets, all these little side plots, and all these little conspiracies that are going on in these novels. So sit back, relax, grab a snack or something to drink, because we're about to get into the first episode of the Secrets of the Stormlight Archive. In our first episode today, I thought we'd start with the first named character of the series, Kalak. The Heralds are quite a misunderstood bunch of people. You guys have been really asking for more information about the Heralds and what they're about. Looking into Kalak, this guy has his hand in so many different pies and is integral to the plot of the Stormlight Archive even more than I realized. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's begin introducing Kalak to you guys and we'll go from there. Kalak, who we often hear referred to as Kalak throughout the novels, is one of the 10 Heralds of Roshar. He is the first named character in the entire series and was integral in what is one of the most pivotal events in Roshar's history, the Last Desolation. In this chapter, we see Kalak come face to face with Jezrien, who is often considered as the leader of the Heralds. It is here he confronts the sight of honor blades stuck into the earth and comes to the realization that the surviving heralds have agreed to betray the Oath Pact. Between desolations, when heralds die, they are sent to Braze and endure torture by the fused, but as we see in this chapter, they leave the burden to only Talon, who is stuck there for the next 4,500 years. We truly get a sense of the pure exhaustion Kalak and his other fellow heralds are feeling, and see the beginning of his hesitant nature that only becomes more and more exaggerated in his appearances throughout the rest of the series. When he survived the desolation, he was supposed to go back as well. Back to that place he dreaded, back to that place of pain and fire. What if he just decided not to go? So what are Kalak's motivations and what has he been up to for 4,500 years? Well, to put it simply, it's bloody complicated. But before we start piecing together all of his appearances in the story, it's important we get some context as to his motivations and why he's doing these things. So in the latest book, Rhythm of War, we found out that Kalak has been living under the alias of Rastaris and living in Shadesmar in lasting integrity, which is the Honor-Spren capital. With this revelation that he's been living under this name, we can now understand that Kalak has been the leader of the Sons of Honor for all of these years, and has been working with some key players in the story, namely Amaram and Gavilar. And we see that not only was Gavilar conversing with Kalak on the night of his death, he also suspected Kalak had something to do with his assassination that night. So this leads us to the question, who are the Sons of Honor, and what have their goals been this whole time? The Sons of Honor are a secret organization of Roshar who seek to return the Heralds with the overall goal of asserting Vorinism as the dominant belief system on the planet. They plan on doing so by kickstarting another desolation to return the Heralds, who weren't even really gone in the first place, to Roshar. As we talked about before, the knowledge at the time suggests that a desolation can only begin after all the heralds break from their torture on the planet Braze, but Talon was still holding out. So the Sons of Honor were actively trying to find a loophole from this rule to return the fused and the heralds to Roshar. Lives will be lost. It has ever been the burden as the Sons of Honor to return the heralds, to return the dominance of the church. We had to put the world into a crisis. Now, Kalak/Rastaris isn't really interested at all in this idea, but is using the research into heralds, brays, and how entities are connected to different planets. He's using this for his own reasons. he is actively trying to escape Roshar for good. So from this we can assume that the majority of the Sons of Honor have no idea that they're actually being led by the Herald Kalak. Now Kalak isn't the only member of the Sons of Honor who is using the organization and its research for his own personal motives. Gavilar Kholin has been doing the exact same thing the whole time. Eli Sadia says to Shallan, most of the Sons of Honor simply wanted their gods back, but Gavilar saw more. He saw entire worlds. So as ever, we find out Gavilar has been a very cheeky boy, and he is not only a part of the Sons of Honor, he's been teaming up with another secret organization too, known as the Ghostbloods. And if you thought Kalak was very sneaky for using his organization for his own benefits, well, check out Gavilar, who's been using the Ghostbloods and the Sons of Honor for his own personal benefit. Now, the Ghostbloods deserve a whole separate video on their own, but the short of it is they have similar goals to Kalak and his goals with the Sons of Honor. They're looking into Void Light, they're looking into how things are connected and how certain people can extend their lives past the natural lifespan of a human. They have much grander goals beyond that too, but again, that's a video in itself. Just know that they and the Sons of Honor have similar interests and are at odds with each other. But cheeky little Gavilar has been using both and has been balancing the scales for his own personal needs, though it hasn't worked out well for him. Kalak's first main appearance chronologically in the Stormlight Archive is Gavilar's Feast, which we hear about from a new perspective during the prologue of each book. Kalak is attending the feast with his fellow herald Nael, both of whom are in talks with Gavilar in a very harsh conspiratorial way. With the power of hindsight, we found out that Nael and Kalak share an interest in Gavilar's research regarding the transportation of void light and anti-void light from Braze and the implications that presents. Now, through piecing together their appearances on each prologue, we can see that Kalak is extremely jittery and agitated during all of these chapters. Yasna overhears Kalak talking to Nael that night, and he says, "We weren't supposed to get worse. Am I getting worse? I think I feel worse." And on face value, it's extremely clear that he's talking about going crazier and losing his mind over thousands of years of being a herald. But if we examine it closely and see the word supposed, we weren't supposed to get worse, this suggests that he understands the reasoning as to why the heralds are going mad, and there's something magical in nature related to their insanity, and we're going to look into that later on in the video. Now, through piecing together everything that happened that night, we find out that Nael is actually the one to set in motion the assassination of Gavilar Kholin, and Kalak is very aware of this, but he does not support it. This is what he says to Nael. "I don't like this. What we've done was wrong. That creature carried my lord's own blade. We shouldn't have let him keep it." This is Kalak talking about Seth, who has Jezreel's honor blade. He is not okay with the assassination of Gavilar Kholin. So from his appearances at Gavilar's feast, we know that he is working with Gavilar. He's trying to get research of different types of lights and understanding basically the science of the Cosmere in order to get off-world. And we know that he is very aware of why and how Gavilar was assassinated. After this point, Kalak almost disappears for the entire series. Okay, let's pause it really quick for a quick lesson in the Cosmere. In the Cosmere, there are these things called cognitive shadows. If you are a cognitive shadow, you have died, but you have not passed on into the afterlife yet. You are this half alive, half dead, interesting thing. And all of the heralds are cognitive shadows. Another key point you need to understand as to why Kalak is unable to leave Roshar is the concept of connection. Now, connection is a very key idea and concept within the Cosmere and takes place in all the Cosmere stories and is especially important in the Stormlight Archive. People, places, objects, things, entities can all be connected through a spiritual way, and if you are connected to something, you are bound to it, and there are certain limitations that come with that. So the main example we see of connections in the Stormlight Archive is through bondsmiths, and in our experience, that would be Dalinar. We've seen how he can make connections with people when he touches them. He can now speak their language, even having no prior knowledge to it. He can also see the lines of connections between people at certain moments. We saw this when he interacted with Nail in Rhythm of War. So long story short, all the way back in the day, the Shard Honor made a connection between himself and all of the heralds. The heralds are connected to him. Now Honor has been splintered, he has been killed or broken in some way, and he's been spread throughout Roshar. That's how people have usually referred to it throughout the story. So all of these heralds are still connected in a way to Honor and connected to the planet of Roshar. So they are unable to leave, and Kalak is doing his very best to find a loophole or a side street or a different way that he can break this connection or go around it to get his body, well, his self, out of Roshar, because he feels like this planet is a lost cause. Fun fact, you actually see when he finds out that Adolin's father is Dalinar and a bondsmith, he freaks out because I don't think he wants any new bonds anytime soon. No more connections for Kalak, he just wants to get out of here. As we finally approach Rhythm of War, we find that Kalak has been living all these years in Shadesmar, and he's been living in the Honestbrenn stronghold known as Lasting Integrity. The Honestbrenn refer to him as the Holy One, and though they clearly have a great respect for Kalak as a herald, those close to him seem painfully aware of how temperamental and kind of crazy he is. We're introduced to Kalak in this book through Mraize. He sends Shallan on a mission for the Ghostbloods with the goal of trapping Kalak's soul or essence in a gemstone. Now we've seen this process before when Moash was sent to kill the Herald Jezrien, but more on that later, it gets pretty interesting. Mraize shows more and more frustration towards Kalak the more Shallan presses him. This is most likely due to the fact that Mraize knows that Kalak has conspired with Gavilar before, but Mraize has been unable to tap the knowledge that Kalak holds, and this kind of information would be invaluable to the leader of the Ghostbloods, Thydakar. So Shallan and co head towards Lasting Integrity with the goal of capturing Kalak as well as fostering a better relationship with the Honestbrenn. This leads to Adolin's trial, where he opts to be on trial for the Recreants. The Recreants was the moment the Radiants betrayed their bonds and placed their shard blades in the earth. We saw this in Dalinar's visions of Feverstone Keep way back in The Way of Kings. From this we reach the epic revelation from Maya that Spren actually chose to betray their oaths too, and this wasn't purely to blame on the humans. But there is one moment in Adolin's trial that is particularly interesting. When Notum appears at the podium and yells, "Honor is not dead, so long as he lives in the hearts of men," Kalak completely freaks out here, quoted as letting out a low whine, pathetic and piteous, beginning to shake. He remains curled up in a ball and then miraculously gets up, lounging in his seat, completely composed. I believe this is a prime example of how certain external conditions can affect the mental state of a herald, and I believe Notum's statement has triggered something deep within Kalak. And I think this is because he had a key part to play in the death and the splintering of Honor. The reason I believe this leads us to the final portion of the video, Kalaks Journal. So in the fourth book, Rhythm of War, if you take the epigraphs from part 4 and combine them all together, you quickly realize this is an excerpt from Kalak's very own journal. Now, this journal is filled with a lot of information. I'll go through as much of it as possible, but there are a few key points that I think play into the narrative the most, and I really want to stick on those. So at the start of the letter, it's mainly Kalak reflecting on how he's changed over thousands of years and how he feels like a shell of his former self, how all this time and torture and just the amount of time that has passed has really damaged him, and he's reflecting on that. He basically can't believe how far he's fallen from being the capable, authoritative person he was, and now he crumbles at the mere thought of any sort of decisions. Now, the first interesting point that Kalak talks about here is the death of his fellow herald, Jezrien. Now, we saw this scene happen in Oathbringer, where Moash actually uses the Racium dagger to try and trap him in a gemstone. Kalak basically mocks them, saying, "You thought you could trap the heralds, but you cannot keep us in the gemstone because the connection between all the heralds is what's keeping them alive in the first place. Once you rip that away, they will fade into nothingness and die." And he knows that about Jezrien, and he knows, and he suspects really, that somebody else is coming to try and kill him and trap him. And his premonition, or his worry, is correct, because that's exactly what Moraes has sent Shallan to do, to trap Kalak in a gemstone. Then there's a little bit of a tangent, a bit of an Easter egg, where he refers to Hoyd, and he says that Hoyd actually taught him, or told him of ways that they can keep their memories and store them using investiture. But Kalak basically says, I don't want to remember all of my failures and all the people I've failed. After this, Kalak elaborates even more about how this works and how the connection between the heralds and the spiritual realm and honor are what keeps them alive, and you cannot keep a herald like a spren in a gemstone. They're a completely different situation. And even though he comes across very harsh and brave and sure of himself, he writes that he is scared of them and he wants nothing to do with this. But now we get to the most juicy part, which I think is the most impactful for the story, and this is where he mentions Ba-Ado-Mishram. I was there when Ba-Ado-Mishram was captured. I know the truth of the Radiants, the Recreants, and the Nahel Spren. I tell you, I write it. You must release the captive unmade. She will not fade as I will. If you leave her as she is, she will remain imprisoned for eternity. As one who has suffered for so many centuries, as one whom it broke, please find Mishram and release her, not just for her own good, for the good of all Spren. For I believe that in confining her, we have caused greater wound to Rosha than any ever realized. This is the single paragraph that makes Kalak one of the most interesting characters in all of the Stormlight Archive, and I think this has huge, humongous implications to where the story is going in Book 5 and beyond. Now, a quick history lesson for those of you who aren't really familiar with Ba-Ado-Mishram. Ba-Ado-Mishram is actually one of Odium's Unmade, and about 2,500 years after the last desolation, she formed a connection with all of the singers on Rosha, and she gave them their forms of power. And this created a new war now known as the False Desolation, and this was the war that ended with all of the Radiants betraying their oaths, known as the Recreants. So through the historical evidence we have through that time, we've learned that there was a strike team of Radiants and a bondsmith, Malishi, who went and trapped Ba-Ado-Mishram in a perfect gemstone. So they were able to trap this Unmade that gave the singers all of their forms. And by doing this, we ended with the Parshmen, these formless Parshendi that became the slaves to Rosha for thousands and thousands of years after this. So Kalak is writing here that he was there the day she was trapped. He knows the secret of the Recreants, so why the Spren and the humans betrayed their bonds, and he knows the secret of the Nahel bond, so he understands the bonds between the Spren and the Radiants completely. We also have confirmation that Deadeye Spren did not exist prior to the Recreants, so obviously Ba-Ado-Mishram has something to do with this, and we know through the sibling and other accounts like Ulim that not only did this mess up the Parshendi and create Parshmen, it actually affected all aspects of life on Rosha, though the extent of that we're unsure of because it's so long ago. But Kalak knows the secret of this. Now, there are some parts of this paragraph which really stand out to me and were basically the whole reason I made this video in the first place. And the first part of it is where Kalak writes, as one whom it broke. He's writing about the imprisonment of Ba'ada Mishram, and he says that it broke him in some capacity. Now I wonder, the fact that we've had it confirmed by Brandon that the Herald's madness has a magical component to it, was the imprisonment of Ba'ada Mishram what created their madness in the first place? Because that's sure as heck what it sounds like as Kalak's writing it here. The second part I find quite interesting is he refers to her as Mishram, and that seems very, very familiar, even friendly. So the fact that he says he was there that day, did he know Ba'ada Mishram? Was Ba'ada Mishram a person prior to this? Were they friends? Was Kalak actually part of the strike team that captured her in the first place? And did it mess things up so badly that he feels guilt over what he's done for Rosha? Did this splinter honor? Did this start a whole calamity of events? We don't know exactly, because the further back you go into history, the blurrier things become. So these are all the questions we're left with at the end of this video. And I believe these are the questions that will be answered in Book 5 of the Stormlight Archive. So that leads us to the end of the video. Shallan is teaming up with Kalak. Are they going to go throughout the Cosmere? Are they going to go straight to the gemstone which holds Ba'ada Mishram and release her? And that's what makes this so much fun. I can only start the conversation continues now with us in the comments. Let's figure out what happens next and where will their stories go. So please comment down below, get engaged. I would love to hear what you guys think of this. Where do you think Kalak's story is going? How do you think Ba'ada Mishram is going to play into things in the back half of the series? And did you enjoy the video? Let me know, because this took a long time, much longer than it should have because I had so many problems. But that is the end of the first episode of The Secret of the Stormlight Archive. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and it feels really, really fun and really good to be making videos about Stormlight again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.